Now welcome to another lightning response video where I take a question from the comments and try to give it a rather quick answer. And so, wasting no time, let's get right to the question, and this time it comes to us from Silver Bullet 1620, who asked, "Hey Thor, why is it when the Jedi are considered selfless and the Sith considered selfish, falling in love and getting married is considered selfish? So many stories, even Luke in Return of the Jedi, showed that love of family can make someone selfless. Luke was willing to give all to save his sister Leia, and then gave even more to save Vader, even though in the end Vader sacrificed himself for Luke out of love. I would think love and marriage would help a hero become more selfless than selfish. I mean, to be pure Sith, you want everything for yourself, including killing your attachments. Mara Jade, Satine, and others help make the heroes better. So why is being a single monk is not always selfless?" Okay, so I think the best way to start to answer this question is actually to ask a different one. That being, if Anakin isn't in love with Padme, if he doesn't marry her and all of that, what happens during that fateful moment in Revenge of the Sith when Windu has Palpatine at the end of his lightsaber ready to kill him and end the threat of the Sith, presumably forever? Now, sure, Anakin wasn't happy that Windu was about to do something that wasn't the Jedi way, that being essentially execute Palpatine, which he'd done earlier to Dooku at the behest of Palpatine. Gotta love the irony there. Anyway, even though, yes, Anakin and Palpatine are good friends, which is absolutely allowed by the Jedi Order, having friends, I mean, he almost certainly doesn't stop Windu from finishing off Palpatine, if not for Padme, if not for this belief that he, Palpatine, could help him save the one that, as Anakin himself says, he cannot live without. Which is the problem with attachments for Jedi, why they can't marry, and why, in a way, it is selfish to fall in love, because Anakin is putting Padme's well-being, and thus his own happiness, above the well-being of, well, literally everyone else in the galaxy. And he's doing it for even just the chance or promise that Palpatine can save her, and for this he'll condemn the galaxy to the rule of a Sith Lord. And don't get me wrong here, under normal or real-world circumstances for us everyday people living here on Earth who will never have a Sith Lord trying to turn us to the dark side, it's not in any way, shape, or form a bad thing to fall in love, get married, and to virtually always prioritize that other person. Star Wars isn't trying to say that attachments or personal intimate relationships are an inherently bad thing. I'd even argue they're one of the things that make life worth living. And I sometimes feel like people, and I don't necessarily mean the commenter in this case, but I think some do misunderstand that the Jedi are not supposed to represent how we should personally live. They are not a blueprint for us to try and follow and replicate, but rather they are an ideal selflessness that we should strive to embrace more in our daily lives. They try to show us that giving is more rewarding than taking for both us and, obviously, those around us. That then brings us to Luke saving his father out of love. Isn't that sort of the opposite message? Isn't his attachment to his father what ultimately wins the day and saves the galaxy? And well, yes and no, because I don't think we can forget or just dismiss the fact that Luke, for a moment there, gives into his anger and basically goes dark side and almost kills his father after he threatens his sister, after Vader threatens to turn Leia to the dark side. And it seems he's only able to stop himself because the Emperor pointed out that his hate was making him powerful, that he'd soon be taking his father's place at his side, which is when Luke looks at his mechanical hand, then at his father's missing hand, and realizes, yep, I'm making the same mistakes my father did before me, and he refuses to make them again. He refuses to fight, and yeah, that probably wasn't the smartest thing for Palpatine to point out in that moment. But anyway, as I've said many times before, I've always thought the interesting thing the sequels could have and really should have explored, in relation to the Jedi anyway, is what exactly was Luke's takeaway from all of that with his father? What is his stance on attachments? Because I do think there is a fascinating discussion around it. And again, out of story, I get the Jedi are meant to represent an ideal, and Lucas is all about that symbolism. But in story, after everything that happened, Luke would, at the very least, I think, kind of reevaluate or re-examine the attachment thing. He'd understand how they can both be a strength and a weakness, and that it very much depend on the individual person or the individual Jedi, which it was. Because certainly there have been plenty of Jedi, and could be many more down the road, that would have no issues handling attachments. They'd make the right call if it ever somehow came down to them having to save the one they loved the most, or doing what is best for the greater good. And I think that would especially be the case if they married another Jedi who would, in theory at least, understand and be okay with whatever choice had to be made. That then leads to, well, why not allow Jedi who can handle attachments to have attachments? Or why not train them to handle attachments from a very young age, just like they train them not to have attachments from that young age? And for one, I don't think there's any way to know in advance, for sure anyway, even if you have trained them their whole life, there's no way to know who truly could and couldn't handle it when push comes to shove. Not to mention, this might cause resentment in the ranks, telling some Jedi they can't have stuff or have a relationship, while others can. And these are the Jedi, the ones you'd have to say no to. They're the ones you'd think would be more likely to be susceptible to their emotions in the first place. And so to sum it up here, love can absolutely be a great strength. For some, loving another can even be their very reason for being and lead them to greatness they otherwise would have never known. And I think that could absolutely be true for some Jedi as well. Some, maybe even most, could still become the perfect example of a Jedi, even better perhaps, for loving another person. However, some could not. Some would let the galaxy burn if it meant saving the one they cared about the most, and would probably become a very powerful Sith in the process. And unfortunately, there's no real way to know for sure which one is which until the choice is placed before them, and thus, cruel in the eyes of some or not, the Jedi are not allowed attachments. Well, that's all I got for this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about all this. What's your stance on Jedi and attachments? Either that, or you can always ask me a question for a future lightning response video. Just start your comment off by saying, "Hey Thor." Whatever you choose to do, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.